What's good, everybody? Today we are trying real hard to rebel against the party, only to be crushed into Big Brother love with George Orwell's 1984. Let's do this thing. It's a cold day in April as the clocks strike 13. Winston's coming home to his big ol' Victory Mansion. Gotta take the stairs today. The elevator basically never works. At every landing as he climbs the stairs, he sees a poster. This big, giant face with the words, "Big Brother is watching you." These posters are part of the party's psychological manipulation of the party members. You are always being watched. The city Winston lives in is called Airstrip 1. It used to be called London, but that was way back in the day. Airstrip 1 is in the country of Oceania, which is one of the 3 superstate countries that govern the world. The party is in control of Oceania. They maintain absolute control of their citizens. They also demand absolute loyalty. Don't be loyal to your wife or children or neighbors. Be loyal to the party, good citizen. Winston gets to his apartment and goes past the telescreen. It's always on, and always talking about how awesome the party is. Winston knows that there is also a camera in it that can see his entire apartment. Every single thing he does in that living space is subject to review by the thought police. Just like the posters, these screens let party members know they are being watched 100% of the time. Winston works as a propaganda officer in the Ministry of Truth, where his job is to correct history. He gets rid of information that contradicts the party's current narrative. What do you mean all of the buildings are broken down and there is no electricity? Our buildings and technology are better than they've ever been. I dare you to prove that it's not so. Winston gets out a little diary, a forbidden object. He got it from the poor proles that the party doesn't care about. The proles are the only thing that the party doesn't control absolutely, and really the only hope anyone has of some kind of disruption of the status quo. Winston writes in his diary about things that happened that day. He saw a man named Orwell, who he believes may hate the party as much as he does, and also a girl with dark hair who has a rockin' bod, but she preaches the party line real hard and he hates her for that. It's possible that he has the allegiances of these 2 characters backwards, but more on that later. As he's thinking and writing, he looks down and realizes he wrote, "Down with Big Brother," a bunch of times, which is a thought crime for sure and will definitely get him re-educated if the party ever finds out. Better keep it on the DL then. Just then, his neighbor, Mrs. Parsons, asks him for help with the plumbing in her house. The plumbing often breaks down in Victory Mansions, and Mr. Parsons is rarely home because of his dedication to the party. Mrs. Parsons and Winston are both a little terrified of her 2 children. The party has a program called The Spies, where children are indoctrinated and encouraged to rat out their parents or other thought crime offenders. Later, Winston writes in his diary, "We shall meet in the place where there is no darkness." That night he has a lot of crazy dreams that are directly contrary to party vibes. The telescreen wakes him up with a whistle. It wakes everyone else up at the same time too. He goes through the mandatory physical exercise routine led by a telescreen instructor and gets called out when he's not participating wholeheartedly enough. The party controls your mind and your body. He's thinking about how he's been told that Oceania, where he lives, has always been at war with Eurasia and has always had an alliance with East Asia. But he's not sure how that's possible. He can't know for sure though, because every history book has been rewritten. He's done exercising, so he goes to work. He takes the outdated histories, incinerates them, and rewrites them to align with party facts. Just one of the many ways the party controls the information that their members receive. Big Brother can never be wrong. At lunch, he sits with a friend of his who tells him about his work on Newspeak. They are creating a new language that will have no words that are capable of subverting the party in any way. If the populace can only think in words that are in favor of the party, does that count as mind control? At this point in time, food is getting pretty hard to come by. Rationing is an everyday thing, but you wouldn't know it based off all of the news info and reading material that the party feeds them. The party makes it a point to strip the individuals of anything that can make them unique and give them a sense of identity. Everyone drinks the same gin, smokes the same cigarettes, wears the same clothes. Winston doesn't even know how old he is because the party got rid of his records. A large chunk of the novel is actually just about Winston trying to find a sliver of individuality in a world of carbon copies. Back in his apartment, Winston writes in his diary that the only hope for revolution is the proles. The proles make up about 80% of the population in Oceania. They could easily overpower the current government. However, they are overworked and uneducated. Winston takes out a children's history book and pages through it. It goes on about how much better life is now that the party is in control, but everything it says contradicts Winston's own experiences. The buildings are not pristine, the electricity is not efficient and effective, the people are not happy and well off. But there are no records of a contradictory past, so how can anyone know for sure? He thinks about one time at work when he stumbled onto a photo that contradicted party propaganda. He is shocked, but he makes sure to control his facial reaction. Yet another form of forced physical control. He destroys the piece of evidence immediately, but never forgets it. Winston feels that true freedom is being able to believe what your eyes and ears are telling you, that 2 + 2 = 4. One morning at work, the dark-haired girl with the rockin' bod passes him a note. He's expecting it to be from the thought police, but actually it says, "I love you." He's worried she's a thought police spy, but he eventually decides to risk getting to know her better. Super incognito mode. They meet in a little wooded area in the countryside. He's worried there might be microphones, but she's been there before and she's convinced they are alone for real. Her name is Julia. They get frisky real quick, a direct party rule violation, and she tells him she's done it at this spot a whole bunch of times. He actually loves to hear this, because it means that Big Brother is not all-powerful the way he thought they were. They come back to London and manage to meet a few times in the following weeks. Unlike Winston, Julia doesn't want Big Brother to be taken down, she just wants to have fun and not get caught. The lovebirds rent a room for their affair above Mr. Charrington's shop in the Pearl District. The vibes of resisting the party are subtle, but absolutely there. It's a super basic room, but they like it. There is a red-armed Pearl woman who does laundry outside the window. She reminds Winston about how the Pearls are their only hope for revolution. Julia brings some forbidden things like real sugar, coffee, bread, and makeup. The kind of thing that makes someone not a carbon copy of someone else. One day they see a rat. It turns out that poor Winston is terrified of the little guys. The rat hints at how the lovers might not be as alone as they think. Julia notices Winston's paperweight, which is a link to his past. Another attempt at clinging to a scrap of personal identity. The two of them start to discuss the Brotherhood, which is a party resistance group. Julia believes all party enemies are made up. Winston is frustrated by Julia's lack of concern and calls her a rebel only from the waist down. Then O'Brien makes contact with Winston. It's confirmed that he is a member of the revolution. O'Brien invites Winston to his house. Winston is thrilled to finally become a part of taking down the party. He's pretty sure that this will only end in his re-education in the Ministry of Love, but he doesn't care. One morning, Winston wakes up in the room with Julia after a bad dream. He tells Julia about his childhood that was rife with trauma, hunger, and loss. He hates the party for getting rid of all human feelings. His desire for resistance is still strong as he talks about how party members are forced to conform to the point of inhumanity. The couple discuss what will happen to them if they are found out. Torture is a given, but they make a pact that they will never stop loving each other, no matter what. Winston is a little too insistent on this point though, making me think he probably won't be able to hold his part of the pact. They go to O'Brien's house to hear about the Brotherhood and the resistance they are putting up. O'Brien tells them that the Brotherhood is real and the fabled Emmanuel Goldstein exists. O'Brien gives him a copy of the famous rebel leader Goldstein's Revolution Manifesto. He commiserates with Winston that one day they will arrive in the place where there is no darkness. This line continues to come up whenever Winston is trying to cover up his pessimism with false hope. Then, without warning, Oceania has switched enemies and allies. Everything that says otherwise has to be rewritten by Winston and the other party members. Afterwards, Winston reads through Goldstein's manifesto and learns that the party uses war as a means to control the masses. It doesn't really matter who the enemy is. Julia comes in while he's reading, and they spend some blissful, quiet moments together. The Pearl woman is singing outside the window. While lying in bed the next morning, the two of them watch the red-armed prole woman and speculate that maybe the proles will one day overthrow the party. Suddenly, the thought police storm in and arrest them. The paperweight, symbolizing Winston's past and also his desire for revolution, is shattered on the floor as they burst in. Mr. Charrington comes in, and it's revealed that he was a member of the party the whole time. Can't even trust your produce guy up in here. In the Ministry of Truth, Winston sits in a cell where the lights are always on. He had hoped that the place with no darkness would be a paradise, but turns out that it's a hellhole. A poet named Ampleforth is put in his cell with him. Not long after, the poet is dragged away and sent to the dreaded Room 101. The father of the children from the beginning, Parsons, is also there. His children eventually did end up snitching on him to the thought police. Good thing they were raised right, isn't it? Winston hopes that the Brotherhood will save him, but then it is revealed that O'Brien, his revolutionary connection, was working for the Ministry all along. It was all a setup. Winston gets his first taste of physical pain in the form of torture. Winston goes through weeks of intense interrogation and torture. He goes back and forth with O'Brien about the party and how absolute their power is. 2 + 2 = 5 if the party says it does. O'Brien pulls some mind trickery, easing up the torture by a lot and letting Winston get comfy in the party's embrace. It turns out that Winston isn't fully converted yet, though. One day he starts screaming Julia's name randomly and saying that he hates Big Brother. O'Brien comes in and says that it's not enough to obey Big Brother, Winston must also love him. Finally, Winston is given a stay in the terrifying Room 101. It turns out that Room 101 is where they keep the things that terrify people the most. In Winston's case, that means rats. O'Brien gets a cage of rats and explains that the rats will eat his face off. Winston cracks. He screams and finally begs O'Brien to put the rats on the thing he loves most. Put the rats on Julia. Winston is now free on the outside. He's sitting in a cafe. He's wholeheartedly accepted everything about the party. He saw Julia one time after he got out, and they both realized that they had betrayed each other. They repulse each other now. As he's sitting there in the cafe, he looks up and sees an image of Big Brother that makes him feel safe and warm. He is consumed with love for Big Brother. And therein lies the rub. Thanks for going through the Dystopia with me. Subscribe for more stories that grow your brain, and until then, take it real easy.